With videos done for Call of Duty 4 and Modern Warfare 3, I just had to finish off the trilogy of the legendary Modern Warfare 2. This is another game that I've completed already many years ago, but it was time to do it all over again. And I know there's a remastered version, but as I'm sure you can tell, I'm a sucker for nostalgia, so I'll be sticking to the original. Plus, the remastered version only has the campaign anyway. Similarly to Call of Duty 4, most of the achievements in this game are unlocked by completing on Veteran, finding all of the collectible intel, and then doing some miscellaneous mop-up. The main difference is the Spec Ops game mode, which was apparently inspired by the success of the Mile High Club level in the previous game. And nearly all of the Spec Ops missions can be completed solo, but I chose to work through them in co-op because, whilst the campaign is certainly a lot easier than the first Modern Warfare, the Spec Ops can get pretty intense and stressful, so I wasn't going to pass up having a helping hand with me. And I wanted to experience it how I did back at release as well, playing with some friends. But before I tackled that, I wanted to get everything else out of the way first, starting with the campaign on Veteran. This is broken up into 3 acts and a total of 18 missions, one of which was just a tad controversial, and in general, it is all much easier than Call of Duty 4 like I said. As is tradition, the first mission serves as a tutorial to teach basic mechanics and controls, and the only challenge here is the pit, a training area with the objective of clearing all the targets as quickly as possible. And there's an achievement for completing in under 30 seconds, which I'll be coming back for in the future. For now, I just did one very rusty, slow and painful run here, and despite the game's best warnings, selected Veteran difficulty. And I also unlocked Back in the Saddle for finishing the mission. Next I was tasked with helping in the rescue of a stranded unit. After calling in an airstrike across the bridge, we moved into the city, first by vehicle and then by foot, clearing out the school to finish up and grabbing 2 more achievements. The first being story related, and the second for completing the opening 2 missions on Veteran. The third level was one of the standout moments of the game. In my head at least, due to it being in the E3 demo all those years ago. And the goal here is to infiltrate a Russian airbase in the snowy mountains and recover a satellite module, taking advantage of the poor visibility in the blizzard to stealth through to the hangar and plant some C4 along the way. There's an achievement for planting all the C4 without alerting or injuring anyone, but again, that's something I'll be coming back to in a bit. Although I did unlock No Rest for the Weary for knifing an unsuspecting enemy whilst making my way through. After collecting the satellite module, the cover is of course blown, and the mission ends with a snowmobile chase down the mountain and into the evac chopper. And with that done, I unlocked achievements for infiltrating the base and completing the mission on Veteran. And now the next level is also a standout moment, but for slightly different reasons. It's not often a game puts you front and centre for committing an act of terror, but here we are. The mission No Russian serves as a major role in starting World War III and places the player in a false flag operation, massacring civilians in an airport. Unsurprisingly, it was rather controversial, and I do remember it being talked about all over mainstream media. There's actually the option to skip the mission with absolutely no penalty whatsoever, and it won't affect anything else. Also, there's no achievements tied to it. The final mission of Act 1 had me fighting through the favelas in the hunt of the arms dealer who supplied the weapons for the airport attack. This was the first part of the game to cause any sort of mild inconvenience. There are a lot of enemies firing down from rooftops and windows, but it was just a case of memorising the spawns really. Plus, it only took about 20 minutes to make it through and capture the target, which unlocked another story related achievement. Act 2 marks the beginning of Russia's invasion of the United States and has a nice cruise through the suburbs being rudely interrupted. I think this level does have a really cool aesthetic. It's not something you really see in games that often. And moving through the streets and into the burger town, there was a lot of defending to do against a small army. There are a few different spots that you have to hold out in, but there was always a ton of cover and weapons plus equipment at my disposal. There's various sniper rifles, deployable turrets, and a predator drone to use, which meant I didn't actually have any trouble getting to the end and on to the next one. Back into the shoes of the British Army now and escaping the favelas after capturing the arms dealer a couple of missions ago. This took me about 20 minutes and half of that was spent literally in the first area. Eventually I did have success by pushing up the left hand side, and there was a couple of miscellaneous achievements which are doable on this mission, but I didn't fancy hanging around whilst on Veteran, so I saved those for later. And finishing this up, I unlocked an achievement for completing the 2 favela missions on Veteran, and then I returned to the cozy suburbs in search of a high value target. And joined by the striker named Honey Badger, which you can mark targets for with a laser. I have no idea how useful this actually is, but it was a pretty cool mechanic to use anyway. And then clearing out the largest of the houses leads to finding the individual dead in a panic room, and brings up another achievement for beating this mission and the Burger Town one on Veteran. Following a lead from the captured arms dealer, the next objective becomes assaulting a Russian gulag and rescuing a prisoner. But first, an oil rig that's being used as a surface-to-air missile site needs to be taken down. This mission introduces the breach mechanic when rescuing hostages, and during one of these I unlocked Knock Knock for killing 4 enemies with 4 shots. And reaching the top of the oil rig I encountered a load of smoke grenades being deployed, but very conveniently there are plenty of thermal weapons left laying around the place, and killing 6 enemies in a row of one of these got me the Some Like It Hot achievement. And with the final hostages rescued and the rig secured, we set off to the Gulag to find prisoner 627. Flying in by helicopter and then fighting through the various levels of the Gulag, there's nothing too tricky to navigate in here. There's a short holdout in the control room which I tackled by just cowering in the corner with the riot shield, which I also used to beat down an enemy for some more gamer score. And this leads into a night vision section before another breach into the prison showers. This area has always stuck in my mind, probably because it'll be reappearing later in a mildly annoying Spec Ops mission. But for now, the last thing to do in here is one final breach into the room housing the prisoner. And in an epic turn of events, that prisoner turns out to be the legendary Captain Price. Unfortunately, the emotional reunion is cut short as the Navy resume their bombardment, but amidst the carnage we latched onto a skyhook and escaped just in time before the Gulag is destroyed, unlocking another story related achievement, as well as one for completing this mission, plus the oil rig level on veteran. Act 2 finishes up back in the shoes of the US Army, attempting to retake Washington DC from the enemy forces advancing both on foot and by air. This doesn't go quite to plan though, and the squad is overrun and forced to evacuate. The evacuation doesn't go swimmingly either as the Black Hawk helicopter crashes back into the ground. The mission ends on a nice cliffhanger as the Rangers are outgunned and outnumbered in a desperate last stand. That meant us on to the third and final act now. Captain Price has a master plan to end the war in the United States, and all it involves is evading some enemy patrols in the forest, crushing the defences at the sub-base, and finally helping him secure the nuclear submarine, before in quite the plot twist, he launches a ballistic missile out of the silo, finishing up the level and unlocking a couple more achievements. And panic not, Price hasn't decided he wants to nuke America all of a sudden. Instead it detonates in the upper atmosphere, creating an EMP which disables devices all across the eastern United States. And it also accidentally destroys the ISS and sadly kills a random astronaut you briefly get to control. But back on the ground now, and the next 2 missions are pretty short and basically merge into one. Picking up from the end of Act 2 with the US Rangers facing near certain death, the helicopters suddenly start falling out of the sky thanks to the EMP. We made our way off the streets and through the President's bunker towards the White House for the final mission of the American campaign. And considering that is the last one, it's very quick and easy, fighting across the lawn and into the White House itself, clearing out the West Wing and the Oval Office before reaching the roof and lighting the flares of victory, signalling the retaking of the city and the end of playing in the United States. Most importantly though, I was rewarded with a couple more achievements from my efforts. The next level is the one that I've had in my head all these years as being the most annoying and daunting for a new veteran run, but spoilers, it really isn't that bad. So the man in charge of the cell responsible for the airport attack and just overall main antagonist of the Modern Warfare franchise is Makarov, and I probably should have mentioned that name before now as it's pretty important. Anyway, at this point in the story we've narrowed him down to 2 possible locations. Soap and Price go to the Boneyard in Afghanistan, whilst Ghost and Roach head to the safe house on the Russian border. Starting in Russia, I pushed my way through the ambushing forces and to the house where there was no sign of Makarov himself, although conveniently his computer was left here with all its wealth of information. And this point onwards is what I remember struggling with back in the day. There's a holdout against his men whilst waiting for the download of information to complete, and the game gives you a lot of claymores to plant around the house and a variety of weapons, but there are so many different entrances to try and keep an eye on that the best tactic is just to sit at the top of the stairs and not worry about any of that. The claymores can still be useful though, because the enemies can disable the download if they reach the computer, meaning you have to go back down into the danger zone to start it up again. So setting up a bit of a perimeter around that is a good idea, and for this run I never had to leave my safe place. And then once the download was complete I made a break for it, which did take a few attempts to make it out alive, and I just tried my best to weave around and use any sort of cover that presented itself, dodging enemy encounters where possible. Although towards the bottom of the hill there were some that I was forced to engage with, but hugging this wall saw me through pretty easily. And then I was at the extraction zone where General Shepard and his men would whisk us away and celebrate us like the heroes we are. But nope, instead we were betrayed and shot dead. So I won't go into the full details of the story as I'm sure a lot of people watching this know already, but Shepard was also a key part of the airport attack as he wanted to provoke Russia and USA into going to war, and therefore had been in contact with Makarov, and with Ghost and Roach potentially catching a glimpse of something they shouldn't have on the files, I guess he just decided that now they needed to be dealt with. At least that's how I read this entire situation. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And my death wasn't in vain though, because I unlocked another story related achievement. And after that, it's back into the shoes of Soap and Price, who are at the Boneyard. This mission is a nice, quick and straightforward one. Shepard and Makarov's men are fighting each other, and I just had to make my way through the heat of the battle and to the extraction point. On the way, Price taps into Makarov's channel and offers to take out Shepard for him, and that's how we get the location of his base of operations. Then finishing up with some dodgy driving into the chopper after only 10 or so minutes spent this level, I was on the finishing straight of the campaign, and I picked up some more achievements for completing this mission on any difficulty, plus completing this and the previous ones on veteran. The final 2 levels of the campaign again blend pretty well into one, and are a nice throwback to the iconic all gillied up section of Call of Duty 4, with Price and Soap stealthing through the base. This time though, I had no choice but to take out everyone in my path. And his first mission takes place mostly in a cave system, chasing down Shepard as he tries to evacuate, and escaping as he sets the place to detonate. Then came probably the most frustrating part of this entire playthrough, and not something that I remembered at all. So the final level has you chasing Shepard by boat. You're still able to fire a sidearm, but Price does most of the shooting, so these initial passages are completely fine. But then comes a large open area of water and a chopper raining down bullets. Price very helpfully tells you to steer clear of open areas and the chopper, but as I'm sure you can see, there's not exactly a wide array of cover to get behind. I did at least get an achievement for killing 20 enemies in a row whilst driving a vehicle though, so that's a positive. I spent less than 10 minutes on this little part, but it genuinely caused me more frustration than pretty much the rest of the game combined, because it felt like I was doing everything right, yet still just dying over and over and just hoping for the right result to come. But it eventually did, and with some fine shooting, Price took down Shepard's escape chopper, and we went tumbling over the waterfall and into the final area of the campaign. Now this might be a bold take, but I feel like Rust might just be the most iconic map in all of Call of Duty. Surely it's in the top 3 at least. I think this is the one my friends and I still talk about the most by far, and there was no argument that couldn't be settled with an interventions only 1v1 on Rust. Anyway, whilst I've been rambling, Shepard plunges a knife into my chest before laying a pretty heavy beat down on Price, and just as all hope is fading away, I heroically pulled the knife out and launched it back into his eye, saving the day. And that's the end of the campaign. All ticked off on the hardest difficulty, and it still plays great. Like I said at the start, it is a much easier and less stressful experience than the first Modern Warfare, and finishing up, I unlocked achievements for completing the last 2 missions on veteran, completing the entire game on veteran, and also completing the game on any difficulty. Now with the campaign finished on veteran, I had the majority of the achievements in the game done already, but there was still a bit of work to do. Most of what I had left was Spec Ops related, but there was a little bit of single player mopping up to get out of the way first. And similarly to other Call of Duty games, there are collectible intel to find in the form of laptops hidden throughout the levels, and I'd found a few during my playthrough, but I was still missing a lot, so I just started from the beginning and worked my way down the list and tackled any other miscellaneous achievements along the way. First up was a return to the pit to complete that in under 30 seconds, and this actually took me a good few attempts to get, but if in doubt I'll just blame the controller. And after grabbing a couple more intels, I planted the C4 in cliffhanger without alerting or injuring any enemies, and that was the ghost achievement done. I then found my 20-second piece of intel in a Burger Town bin for the first of the 2 collectible achievements, and switched up the pace a bit by murdering 7 chickens in under 10 seconds on the Hornet's Nest mission. Back at the White House, I took down 5 enemies in a row with different weapons before finally finding the 45th and final piece of intel. A lot of these are towards the end of the mission, so I basically had to replay the entire game again, but on recruit difficulty it is extremely easy to blitz through. And the last achievement for this part of my completion was unlocked by killing 10 enemies in a row with Kimbo weapons, and I did this in the favelas on takedown. And now I just had one game mode left for the 100%, the timeless classic that is Spec Ops. And I'm sure most of you already know what it is, but just in case, it's a set of fast-paced missions in the spirit of Mile High Club from Call of Duty 4, and there was actually originally meant to be a co-op portion inserted into the main single-player campaign, but Infinity Ward said that they found that attempting to make the single-player missions co-op compatible was less fun than the regular mode and just broke the feeling of immersion that they were going for. But luckily for us, instead of scrapping it entirely, they created the Spec Ops mode with all levels tailored for 2 players. And this also allowed the designers to not only add new levels, but also reuse existing assets. And the missions can be played solo, split screen, or online, but there are a few that need 2 players in order to do. And in total there are 23 missions, each giving a possible 3 stars for completing the highest difficulty requirement, so obviously we're playing these all on veteran. Broken up into 5 tiers from Alpha to Echo, and generally, as you'd expect, they get harder as they go. But there are definitely some lower tier ones that gave us a bit of trouble, and some of the latter ones that we completely breezed through, sometimes aided with some slightly cheesy strategies. Also, to save this video from going on for absolutely ages, I won't go into massive detail about each one. I'll just give a brief mention and be a bit more specific as there are some achievements involved. So starting from the top and the beginning of Alpha and the Semper Fi mission, we had to hold off 5 waves of enemies and had a fair amount of weapons at our disposal. This was straightforward, but still took a few attempts because of some unfortunate grenades landing at our feet. We had a pretty painful wipe just as we were nearing the end of the final wave, but I did get a few achievements on this mission. Firstly for killing 2 enemies with 1 shot, then for killing 10 enemies with a Predator drone, and finally for earning my first star. We then ventured back into the favelas to eliminate 50 gang members, and there are also civilians running around, so you can kill up to 3 of those and then any more is an instant fail. It's easy stuff because they spawn in waves, and finishing up this level got me another achievement for reaching over 4 stars in total and unlocking the next tier of missions. And then suspension was also nice and simple. You just need to reach the extraction point on the other side of the bridge. And I was getting some pretty strong Left 4 Dead 2 flashbacks looking at this as well. You can probably avoid the enemies and run past, but there's really not that many to fight through. And we did this first try with no issues and hit 8 stars in total, which opens the 3rd set of missions. And lots of achievements being handed out early in the Spec Ops grind. And another one followed shortly after when I killed a couple of repelling enemies before they landed. And this is one of the 2 levels that requires 2 players. One controls a soldier on the ground and needs to reach an objective, whilst the other protects them from above as an AC-130 gunner. And it's definitely one of my least favourite to do. I'm clearly a creature of comfort because anytime I'm split up from my partner, the stress levels peak. And the gunner, which was me in this instance, does kill the vast majority of the enemies, but there are a couple of moments where the person on foot, which was Joe, needs to deal with enemies lurking inside. And it can just be a massive pain to not get caught out whilst checking the rooms, so we started this one a few times and decided it could wait for another day. We took to the snowmobiles in what is effectively just a time trial to the bottom, and making the 3-star cutoff unlocked an achievement for getting max stars in 5 different Spec Ops missions. And after that was another sort of time trial, this time having to defuse 3 bombs around the favela marketplace. This one was a little tricky and we had a number of restarts, although I did unlock another achievement along the way for getting a grenade launcher triple kill, before getting the completion on attempt number 4 or so. Now I didn't realise you can actually do the pit with 2 players, so I quickly ran through it on my own when the other guys weren't around, getting the blackjack achievement for 21 total stars. And only a few days later, Joe and I reunited and picked up where we left off. Seeking our way through snowy forest, this one just took some trial and error, learning the enemy's pathing to not get caught. And after that, we set up camp out the back of a diner in Burger Town to earn a certain score. It's much easier doing it this way because the enemies will slowly come to you, and we just made the most of all this cover as well as the thermal weapons. And then my worst fears were realised as we were split up once more. But it was actually pretty easy this one. Joe taking control of the chopper gunner, as I made my way on foot through the Burger Town and onto a roof to the evac spot. And getting that one done unlocked achievements for earning all 3 stars in 10 different missions, as well as 30 stars total. Next was one of several Spec Ops that has really stuck in my mind after all these years. We're back in the Burger Town for the 3rd time in a row, and the objective is just to hold out against 5 waves of enemies, which increase in amount of foot soldiers and vehicles. And doing it back in the day, we always sat behind this counter, and this time was no different. There are a couple of turrets to set up, but those get destroyed super quickly, and we did get downed a few times, but the other person was always able to get the revive off. And generally it's pretty easy to position yourself to peek over and deal with enemies coming from in front. It's just sometimes the sides which can get the drop on you, so keep an eye on that minimap. And finishing up wave 5, unlocked it goes to 11 for earning at least 1 star in 11 different Spec Ops missions. And there weren't too many achievements left to go now. Joe's last act was wreaking havoc on a bridge with me, and then a couple of weeks later, Ollie and I teamed up to take down the rest. Our first objective was ticking off Overwatch, the mission we put off from earlier, and this time I went on foot and Ollie supported from above. Again, it was just some trial and error learning the enemy spawns and the positions where the AC-130 isn't going to be able to help, and there were some really painful failures, but after about 20 minutes I made it to the end, and we are very happy to see the back of that one. The next mission was just as long, even without any wipes. Making our way through the all gillied up map from the first Modern Warfare, there were just a ton of camouflage snipers to deal with, and they just kept downing us over and over again. But as long as we both didn't get downed at the same time, it was all good. And this is another example of these being much easier to take on if you have a partner to help you. We then fought our way through the shower room to the gulag. Well, actually, we fought our way through the first room or so, and then just made a run for it with riot shields, and picked up Professional for earning all 3 stars in 15 of the missions. I unlocked another achievement on the next one for killing my first Juggernaut in Spec Ops, and I remembered the graveyard mission being a lot scarier than it actually is. Although it was pretty chaotic still, there are quite a lot of enemies to deal with, including a few juggernauts, but enough cover and high ground to get it done without much of a problem. After that was a return to the airport to blitz past more waves of riot shield enemies before we made it to one of the most annoying Spec Ops missions out there. And war driving requires 3 lots of data to be downloaded from laptops located in the houses of this lovely suburban street. And just like in the campaign, enemies can interrupt the download, and that forces you to put yourself back into the firing line by restarting it. Of the 3 laptops, we found that the second was definitely the easiest to hold out at. There's a convenient corner to tuck into and the turret wasn't covering fire. The first was much more annoying because the safest place to position is at the top of the stairs. However, that left us unable to defend the laptop from up here, so it was often getting paused, leaving one of us to kamikaze down there and hope to start it up again before getting downed. The third and final download is mostly made tricky by knowing that a failure here means redoing it all again, which is exactly what happened to us on one occasion. But the next time managed to get it done, and all in all this mission took us a rather painful 35 minutes in total. Somehow the next one took even longer, although at the same time it didn't feel anywhere near as stressful as war driving. So the objective here is to plant explosives on a few targets in the blizzard whilst trying to remain hidden. This reminded me of one of those memory testing games because each attempt was just making it a little further and learning the locations and the movement of the hostiles. And in the first bunch of tries we were taking out all the enemies, but then other patrols would find the bodies and sound the alarm. And eventually I realised I could actually just sneak past nearly everybody to get the explosives planted on the runway, whilst Ollie took care of the other one. I then looped back around to him and we made our escape. And we spent nearly 40 minutes on this one when really if I just quickly watched the guide it would have taken 5 minutes. But where's the fun in that? Estate takedown was another test of patience, 40 enemies to deal with on veteran including 3 or 4 juggernauts. Snipers absolutely destroyed juggernauts, so we just made sure we weren't getting caught out in big open areas when they spawned, and overall took our time and breezed through. And this meant we were down to the final 3 missions, the Echo tier, so very close to the finish line now. And where better to start than some premium cheesy strategies. Something I've remembered as clear as day after all these years is the spot to completely nullify the challenge of having to kill 10 juggernauts in the favelas. So with the cart partner you can position yourselves in this tiny room. Ollie in this instance was sat in the doorway and I was prone in the corner. And that allowed him to do whatever he could in terms of damage before being unable to attack whilst downed. And at that point I'd revive him and repeat. And this was definitely 10 minutes well spent here. The Juggernaut onslaught continued on the oil rig this time, and the best way to deal with this is to fight up to the helipad at the top, usually encountering a couple of enemies on the way, and then just camp the doorway with snipers. And the Juggernauts will eventually come running through, so just wait it out. It does get pretty tense just staring at the doorway, but once we'd got in position, we sailed through and onto the final Spec Ops. And this last one was really not fun. I'm not ashamed to admit this somehow took us well over 1 hour to complete. Now, I could probably make a short video of just this mission, but I'll save you from that and just give you a summary. So starting at the bottom of the oil rig again, there are 2 hostage rooms to breach, one immediately after spawning in, and the second is the final area. And between those are a lot of enemies, a small chopper, and smoke on the top deck, forcing the use of thermal weapons. Our problems were mostly dealing with everything on the top deck. The enemies seemed to be infinitely respawning, so we had to push up the stairs, and we did start to have some success moving to the left hand side, which leads up to the breaching doors. But for some reason, I was just absolutely useless at this one. I remember there being a guy running with a knife who needed to be dealt with first, but after that I just had no idea who was a priority target, and I kept getting downed, leaving it up to Ollie to try and save the day. There was a wonderful moment though when he decided to switch teams and execute a hostage, failing the mission with only 1 or 2 enemies left. Not that I was in any position to moan though of the way I was performing. We were pretty decent at making it to the final room now though, so before long we did have it done, with no thanks to me again. And that was the end of the struggle, unlocking star 69 for collecting every available star, plus on a roll for getting at least 1 star in each mission. But there was just one thing left to do for the full completion. My last achievement was for killing 4 enemies in a row whilst downed in Spec Ops, and we did this in a pretty interesting way. We loaded back into the Semper Fi level, and once I had control of the Predator missile, I launched one at a group of enemies. Ollie then downed me, and a couple of seconds later the missile landed, bringing up my achievement and the end of my journey with the original Modern Warfare trilogy. I do plan on doing lots more Call of Duty content, especially zombies, but until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.